Hey guys, it's your boy 14 Fluffies here. Today I have a discussion about side deck cards this format and for future formats. I feel like the format's about to come to an end, and recently we've been seeing a lot of interesting developments with the metagame. Recently Infernoids are getting dick hopped because someone went 16-0. Obviously, I mean it's pretty. We've all heard of this story already. And obviously now people are just, riding the hype train behind Infernoids. Oh my god. But, we've also seen Psyframes, the introduction of Psyframes and how they're rearing their faces in the meta. We also have the Clowns and Norden, stuff after Clash Rebellions and the Megatons. This format is going to end completely different from how it started. It's going to be a completely different metagame. And same thing with next format. It's going to keep changing the more new cards we get. And I've kind of had to rethink my entire side deck just to deal with these changes. I'm not too worried about Infernoids. I'm just going to give it a few weeks, and then I'm just going to give Infernoids a week or two, and then for the hype to die down, because realistically, I mean, Infernoids, they are a very sacky deck. Now that people realize that, now that, a lot of people are starting to play that deck, but, I realized that Infernoids are a pretty simple matchup if I could just summon Darklaw and just pray that they don't have a way to get over it. So pretty much, if you can open up any defensive cards on a Darklaw, you pretty much beat Infernoids. But we're going to discuss what I changed in my side deck and potential other side deck cards for this format and for future formats. So let's start with my side deck and the changes I've made to it. First off, something that hasn't changed. I'm still playing the 2 Kaiser Coliseum. Like, this card was great to begin with, but with the introduction of Clowns, this card just got infinitely better because it pretty much it stops Trick Clown and Hat Tricker. If you're able to kill your opponent's Trick Clown and it's not able to float, you pretty much removed that threat for the entire game. Especially if you're playing a deck like Clown Dolls or Performage Necros, where they only play one Trick Clown. This really that'll really shut that engine down, and it will definitely make your game a lot easier. I mean, especially since I play heroes, and realistically, sitting on Darklaw plus this is just amazing in general. But it just shuts down so many other things, and almost makes it impossible for them to get rid of Darklaw outside of inherent destruction. Next up, something new I've been testing out. 3 copies of Soul Release. I took out my Artifact Lancias for this, just because with how many decks now rely on their graveyard, this card really just shits on so much. Like, this card, Rex Infernoids, I have to adjust that. It Rex Infernoids, Shaddolls, Burning Abyss a little bit if you can banish a Dante or two, maybe a Virgil, if they somehow got a Virgil out. Let's see. It really, it's not great against Tallarknights, but, if you can banish some Denebs, if you can banish at least one Deneb, that's alright. And it just has a lot going for it. It's the ultimate form of graveyard removal. Like, if you can banish a couple Shaddoll Fusions and, some of the better Falco targets, you can just put yourself ahead in the game so much. Next up, I still think Mind Crush is still somewhat viable. I mean, I don't like this card as much as I used to. I somewhat question its viability in this format currently, and into next format. Realistically, I would only side Mind Crush against Necros in my mirror match at this point, just because, well, I know how my mirror match goes. I typically lose because my opponent gets a Darklaw out before me, and they just stop me from getting out my shadow. They just stop me from getting out my plays. But realistically, yeah. But I have other things. I've made adjustments for my side deck for the hero mirror match. Not like I am really going to run into it that often now, since Infernoids are like the new thing apparently, and so are Psyframes. Like, those 2 decks are they're the newest contenders. I mean, Infernoids have always been there, but they weren't really considered, tier 1 material until, they went 16-0 at Dallas. But yeah, another card that's new that I'm actually that I'm pretty much running just because of Norden now is 3 non-fusion area. Like, this card is the shit against Shadalls. We already know this, but not only does it kill Shaddoll Fusion and L Shaddoll Fusion, it also kills instant fusion too. Not only does it, so this pretty much stops Norden and all their Shaddoll fusions. I mean, realistically, I only see myself citing this against Shadalls, and I know that it's kind of a counterproductive card for my strategy because I actually play Poly and Miracle Fusion, but it is what it is. I think this card will hinder my opponent much more than it would hinder me. God damn it, shut up, Azzy. Sorry, that's a cat. I'm going to side 777 tools. I don't really like this card as much because, you know, I'm not really running into as many back row heavy decks now. I'm thinking about maybe replacing these with light mirrors for the Cosmo matchup, just because, you know, that matchup was pretty abysmal. But it's still great against Ritual Beast and Tellarknights, just because this card is superior to Wiretap in the Ritual Beast matchup, just because you can negate their steeds and destroy it, as opposed to negating their steeds and shuffling it back to the deck for them to search again. Kind of like how Infernities could research their barrier after it got wiretapped, you know, stuff like that. Let's see. I feel like it could be somewhat useful against Psyframes, just because it stops that one annoying trap that, you know, makes them go super plus every turn, and, you know, they can't use that bitch-made one from that negates traps from their hand, since 7 Tools is a counter trap, but I'm not sure. I haven't really played against enough Psyframes to, you know, really test out my side deck against them. And lastly, Chaos Trap Hole. I'm using this in place of Light Mirrors. I'm only running it at 1. The thing about it is that it actually is pretty good against Clowns, just because it banishes Trick Clown. Like, what more do you want, really? It's also good for Tellarknights, Necros, BA Dolls, Heroes. Yeah, it's pretty good against a lot of things. And even the straight Evil Storm player that you run into, like, if you still play Evil Storms for some reason. I don't know, I think Evil Storms are a pretty good deck right now, but that's it from what I'm running in my side deck. Personally, I would like to get some Maxis in here, but Maxi is kind of expensive right now. Light Mirror is another thing I would probably think about. Yeah, I also have I think about other cards that could potentially be cited in here. One is Burial, but I think it's kind of but realistically, I don't think it would be that good in the side deck. The reason why I'm actually suggesting this card is because, since it's a quick play, I was thinking, since you could actually return from any banish to the graveyard, so it's like, couldn't you theoretically use this to disrupt your opponent's banish zone? Like, if your opponent's playing Cosmo, and they activate the Cosmo Town, and they used to get a banished Cosmo from their banish zone to their hand, you can just ask them to declare their target, they tell you their target, you can chain Burial, and then just return it to the graveyard and disrupt their play with it. And you can also just do the same thing with Ritual Beast when they chain their Defusion, and you can ask them to declare their targets, they'll tell you their targets, chain Burial, put them in the graveyard, you know, and that interrupts their play too. It's just a thought. Realistically, the only deck I can actually see this happening in is Infernoids, just because they main Burial, but other than that, I don't really think it's a thought. I mean, if you can find other ways to incorporate it into your deck, the more power to you. I think Chain Disappearance can actually start being relevant again, just because Trick Clown. I know Trick Clown is at 1700, as actually 1600, but when it brings itself back with its own effect, it makes itself 0, and you can just Chain Disappearance it. I mean, I suppose you can use it against Shaddoll a little bit, like you can Chain Disappearance a Falco, a Hedgehog, you know, stuff like that. Outside of that, I mean, you could hit Skarm. I think you could hit Skarm and Graph. Other than that, I don't really think you can hit very much with Chain Disappearance. But if you do, typically it's a pretty big game-changing card if you can resolve it. It doesn't really hit anything in Necros or Tellarknights, so it's not really that great against everything in this format, but it is what it is. Wait, can this thing hit anything in Infernoids? I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Maybe like Entra or something, I don't know. Next up, this is more something I've thought of for Psyframe. Divine Wrath. Divine Wrath is a pain. Like, Psyframes, their effects from hand are a pain in the ass, and Divine Wrath kind of just stops that shit. especially since, you know, especially since they can all just chain themselves. They can just, like, it's a pain. I don't like getting I don't like that cockblock I don't like that cockblock Valkyrus that they have that ends the battle phase and destroys my monster. So that stops that. I don't want my key plays being stopped by their stuff. So I'd imagine that Divine Wrath would be very good against Psyframes. Same thing with Chaos Trap Hole, just because it negates their Psyframe summon and they can't respond to it with other Psyframes. And speaking of, you know, just stopping monster effects, I think Majesty's Fiend could actually be seeing more side deck play. Thank God this thing got reprinted in the Megaton so that everyone has access to it. I'm not sure how many decks can utilize it, though, outside of, like any kind of deck that, I don't know, Tribute summons a lot, like Monarchs. I know it's cited for that BA cited, but, all I know is that Majesty's Fiend is the absolute shit against Psyframes. I'm not sure how much I'll be running into Psyframes, considering that, you know, they had their second to shine, and then, you know, Infernoids got dick-hopped, but Psyframes are still pretty big on, you know, at least on Dueling Network, at least. Majesty's Fiend is something I would probably consider if I was, you know, playing a deck that wasn't really hindered by Majesty's Fiend as much. And lastly, I think that one card that people still overlook that I think could be played in more side decks is Gorz. Like, I don't know why Shaddoll aren't playing Gorz. I mean, I understand that the main deck space may be tight, but, you know, Dolls hardly play any back row, so I don't know why they wouldn't play Gorz. Let's see, other decks that could potentially utilize Gorz. I feel like Psyframe could potentially use Gorz, but, you know, because you can't really get Gorz off the field to summon your other Psyframes, it may not be that great. I mean, I think Wind Up Rabbit is probably better as a way of establishing field presence, or like if you play like a mini Yosenju engine in there, just to, you know, establish more damage and stuff, like, I don't know. But I feel like this card would be great in Shaddolls and like any other rogue deck this format. Like, I remember I've been citing Gorz for the longest time, and I didn't want to give up Gorz, but I kind of needed to make room for the Chaos Trap Hole and stuff. We'll see, though. I still think that there's a lot of other things that could potentially be useful for this for the remainder of this format and into the beginner of next format. If you guys have any ideas, just tell me in the comment section. And as always, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.